son Danny was born in 1983, which isn't the dark ages, but it was as far as Sturge-Weber syndrome goes, right? So he was born in a regular local hospital, and of course the first thing that I noticed was the port wine stain on his face, and I'm like, we actually changed his name. His name was going to be Mark Daniel, and then I said, well, everybody will tease him and say, is your name Mark because of the mark on your face? So we switched it around and we call it was Daniel Mark. So, you share rooms, when you're in the maternity ward there. So it was very uncomfortable. First of all, I was told it's nothing. It's just a birthmark. It'll go away. He'll be fine. And so I wasn't worried too much about it, but it was, of course, very obvious. So do you know when back then the photographers would come around and take pictures of the newborns or whatever and sell them to you? The photographer came in and looked at my son and turned around and went back out. Now, this, you had an open, wide nursery, and people would be standing there and say, look at that. Like, this was hours after he was born. Do you see that baby there? I wonder what's wrong with that baby. And then this was probably the worst and most unprofessional. The curtain was drawn between our two beds, and my next door neighbor's pediatrician came in, and she was saying, oh, like this, her daughter had like a little bit of a strawberry mark here or something. And she was all concerned about this little tiny birthmark. And this is a doctor now said, if you think that's bad, you should see that baby down there in the nursery right next to me. And he said, then you wouldn't have anything to worry about, because I'll tell you what, that is horrible. That's exactly what he said to me. Then my pediatrician came in and said, again, just a birthmark, nothing's going to happen. It would be fine. Well, I had just graduated nursing school, and I remember a tiny little thing in nursing school about Sturge-Weber syndrome. And it was, I think the words were rarely, if a child is born with Sturge-Weber syndrome, born with the port wine stain, you may want to check for Sturge-Weber syndrome. This syndrome includes intractable seizures, profound mental retardation, blindness, I forget what else it said, and life expectancy is 6 months to a year. So I go back to my pediatrician. I say, what about this? He's like, oh, that never, doesn't happen. So as typical in Sturge-Weber newborns, he met all his milestones from zero, from the time he came home to 6 months of age. Actually, met them early, which I learned out later was because they burn more glucose. But at 7 months old, he started having seizures, but these weren't like the typical seizures. These were, well, they called them back then infantile spasms. But he would just do like this little, like this, like it looked like a startle response. So he would just do this, and then maybe a little while later do it again. And I'm like, oh, something's not right about this. So I watched him for a few days, and it got progressively worse. So I called my pediatrician, and my pediatrician said, now this was in Pittsburgh, so he said, go to Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh and have him evaluated. So I take him there, and back then, I think I said it in one of these, the only type of any sort of testing they could do was oh my gosh, an X-ray of his brain. That's all they could do. There was no CAT scans, there were no MRIs, there was nothing. And so even at that early age, at 6 months of age, he had profound calcification on the left side of his brain. So that's when I got the diagnosis of Sturge-Weber syndrome. But you know what they told me what it was? The exact same 2 lines that I read in my nursing book. No written material. This is a teaching hospital. No written material on it. I searched everywhere. Obviously, no internet at the time. So I went from the time he was diagnosed, he started to decline rapidly because we couldn't control the seizures. Well, there was just phenobarbital, and there wasn't any medications back then that were very effective for seizures. So by the time he was 2 years old, he had really regressed because we couldn't stop these seizures. So I was getting desperate. I couldn't find information anywhere. And when he was, I guess, 4, there used to be that magazine that was called something Parents, Exceptional Parents. And it was stories about children who had other, kinds of things. Well, Karen had put a little thing in the back. If you have a child that has this Port Wyatt's thing, blah, blah, blah. This was right after she was born. Please call this number. Well, you think, okay, I'll call this number. There's information somewhere. Well, it was Karen herself that answered the phone because that's how small. I think we were like, I don't know, maybe the 10th person that joined the organization. And so from then on, it was like we bonded. We started, doing the conferences. I had the first fundraiser in Pittsburgh in 1987, and we were so excited because I thought, I'm not even going to break even. And we made $1,500, and I was like, woo, the world. They told me my son wouldn't live to be a year old. I took care of him till he was 32 years old in the house. And he never did walk or talk or any of that, but he had the biggest personality that you would ever want to see. And so I'm sorry, I didn't know I was going to cry. But it has been quite the journey. And he actually passed away in 2015. But I still come to do this because I want to help anybody else who maybe has. I never wanted anybody to be so alone and go through it alone for 4 years like I did and not even know there was anything out there. I want, if I can help anybody with my story, I want to be able to help them with my story. I took my son to the emergency room once, and they actually took him away from me because they thought, this is Children's Hospital. I was burning him and abusing him. So they called social services in. So there's stories like that I can tell you, and I hear them from other people. And actually, Dan, if I can help anybody, just give them support. That's what we used to have to do. People would call me because Karen got too busy, and they would call me and say, my child was just diagnosed with Sturge-Weber syndrome. Well, I would get nervous because they would say, tell me about your child. And then I'd be like, well, tell me about your child, because he was a rare disease and probably one of the worst of all of the Sturge-Weber, kids. So, I had a psychologist tell me after he was born, his dog had a higher IQ than my son. And then, everybody says, put him away. He's not going to know the difference. Put him in the home. You shouldn't take that time from your other kids. Well, that boy changed my entire family. They're the ones that go out and somebody's getting picked on, they'll step right in their way. If somebody needs a friend, they'll go right over and be their friend. And, and not just my immediate family, but my entire extended family. They always stick up for the people that nobody else sticks up for. That wouldn't have happened if they didn't know, if they didn't see how that affected him, So I say it's like putting a pebble in the lake. The ripples go out. You never know how far they're going to go out, but I think that, that's all it takes. And I tell people that all the time. Just try once. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. But one little pebble can make that difference.